We're always on the lookout for AI tools that can really shake things up, you know? And we often find ourselves turning to AI Agent Store for that.
Yeah, it's become a go-to resource for sure.
It has. And today we've got one that claims to do just that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called DeepOpinion. Have you heard of it?
I have actually. It's all about making sense of all that data we all deal with. Turning it into something we can actually use.
Okay, so who is it for? Not just anyone, right?
Right. Not for everyone. It's more for professionals who work with a lot of information that's not structured, I guess you could say, like
Right.
business analysts and data scientists, project managers, anyone like that who spends a lot of their day, going through emails, reports, that kind of thing.
So it's like this assistant that never gets tired of reading those long reports.
Exactly.
But how does it work? What's the magic behind it?
Well, it uses generative AI and these things called large language models, or LLMs.
LLMs. I've heard that term, but honestly, I'm not sure I totally get it.
Well, think of it this way. It's like a computer program that's been trained on tons and tons of texts, like books and articles, even code. And over time, this program, this LLM, starts to pick up on the patterns of how we use language, like, how we put sentences together and how words relate to each other. And then it can actually use what it's learned to create its own text and answer questions and summarize information, even translate languages.
So it's like this super reader that can understand what it's reading, not just scan for keywords.
Exactly. That's what allows it to, do things like find trends and pull out important information and even come up with insights that people might miss.
That sounds really impressive. But is it hard to use?
Well, that's one of the things that makes DeepOpinion kind of special. They've designed it so you don't need to know a lot of code to use it. So even if you're not super techy, you can still use it.
So powerful, but easy to use. I like that. But how do we know it really works? Is this like still experimental or something?
They've been recognized as an IDC innovator for LLM-driven document understanding.
And what does that mean exactly?
Well, it means that, they're not just messing around. It gives them credibility in the AI world.
Makes sense. So they have the tech and they're recognized for it, but how much can DeepOpinion actually do on its own? I mean, they mentioned a 73% autonomy level. What does that even mean in real life?
It can pretty much handle about 90% of the process without any help from a person. That means it can take a ton of data, process it all, analyze it, and then give you usable insights all without you having to do much at all.
That's a lot of work taken off your plate. But that means there's still a role for humans, right?
Absolutely. And this is really important. DeepOpinion is a great tool, but it's not meant to totally replace human judgment. There's still that 27% where we need to step in. Like for the really big decisions, and for fine-tuning things and, anything that needs a human touch, it's better to think of it as a really powerful partner, not a replacement. So it's all about, finding that balance between letting the AI do its thing and making sure we're still in control.
Right. And that brings up a good point. Where does DeepOpinion really excel? What are some examples of how it can be used?
So let's say you're a financial analyst, dealing with tons of loan applications.
Isn't there?
Well, instead of spending weeks going through each one by hand, you could give them all to DeepOpinion.
Oh, well.
And it could pull out all the important info, like income, credit score, employment history, you name it. And then it could analyze, patterns and even flag anything that looks suspicious.
So it's not just about saving time. It's about making better decisions, right?
Yeah.
Like catching things you might have missed otherwise.
Exactly. And think about what that means for things like risk assessment and fraud detection. It could really change the game.
Yeah, for sure. What about other industries, though?
It's not just finance. Let's say you're a project manager trying to keep a huge project on track.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Always so many things going on. It's like you're constantly putting out fires.
Well, imagine having DeepOpinion as your co-pilot, It could keep an eye on everything, identify potential problems before they even happen.
So you're not always playing catch up.
Exactly. And it could even point out connections between tasks that you might not have noticed. Those dependencies that can really mess things up if you miss them.
I'm starting to get the picture here. It's like having this virtual project manager working 24/7 to keep everything moving smoothly.
Yeah. And what's even cooler is that DeepOpinion can handle text in over 100 languages.
Wow. So it doesn't matter where your clients or your team are located?
Nope. Language is no barrier. But we've talked a lot about efficiency and time saving and making better choices. But what about the bigger picture? What does this mean for people, for how we work?
Yeah, good question.
If we can take all those boring, repetitive tasks and give them to a system like DeepOpinion, well, then that frees us up to focus on things that humans are really good at. Things like creative thinking and problem solving and coming up with new ideas.
So it's not about AI replacing us, but about AI helping us to be better at what we do.
That's it. And as AI keeps getting more advanced, this kind of teamwork between humans and AI is going to be more and more important. The tools that can really bring human intelligence and AI together, those are the tools that are going to change the world.
Okay, so deep opinion sounds amazing so far. But let's talk about the practical stuff for a minute. It's enterprise grade, which usually means pricey. What's the deal with their pricing?
Well, they have a closed source model.
So no peeking behind the curtain to see how it works. But how does that affect things like cost and accessibility?
One thing to note is that even though it's closed source, it's got a really high popularity rating on AI Agent Store, like 78%, which tells me that it's being used by a lot of different people and, actually delivering value for them.
So even though the code is closed off, the platform itself is still easy to use and flexible enough to meet different needs.
Right. And when you see all the industries they work with, like IT, finance, manufacturing, insurance, it's clear that Deep Opinion's core functionality, has a lot of appeal.
It shows that we all need this kind of smart automation no matter what industry we're in. So it sounds like Deep Opinion is hitting that sweet spot.
Hmm.
Powerful enough for big companies, but also user-friendly enough for all sorts of users. It feels like we're at this point where, work is changing in a big way. And Deep Opinion is a great example of how AI is driving that change.
It is.
For those who are just starting to explore AI, what's the key takeaway they should keep in mind?
Well, I think the main thing is that AI isn't some, far off thing in the future. It's here right now, and it can really change how we work. Tools like DeepOpinion, they're showing us that it's possible to automate all those, tedious tasks that eat up our time and energy.
Yeah, and that lets us focus on the things that make us human right.
Yeah,
Our creativity, problem solving, all that good stuff.
right. It's not about replacing us, but about making us better.
I like that.
Mm.
So anyone out there who's feeling overwhelmed by all the information they deal with every day, Deep Opinion might be worth a look.
Yeah.
And speaking of making things easier, don't forget to check out AI Agent Store at aiagentstore.ai. That's our go-to place for finding the best AI tools out there, the ones that can really help you in your work and in your life. But before we wrap up, I have one last question for our listeners to think about. Imagine you've given all those boring tasks to Deep Opinion. What would you do with all that extra time and mental energy?
That's the exciting part, right? The possibilities are endless. I guess you could finally start that project you've been putting off or learn something new or just spend more time with people you care about. It's about taking back your time and focusing on what really matters to you.
Well said. This has been a fascinating look at how AI is shaping the future of work. And Deep Opinion is a perfect example of how it can have a positive impact. Thanks for joining me on this exploration.
It was my pleasure. I always enjoy getting to dig into these new technologies and thinking about how they can make our lives better.
And to our listeners, stay curious and join us next time as we continue our journey into the world of AI. Until then, happy automating.